Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Agency Side Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Levinson, and I'm here today with Anson Sowby, co founder and CEO of Battery, the award winning creative agency in Los Angeles with a reputation for bold, culturally resonant work. Battery has led standout campaigns for Netflix, Hulu, Disney, 2K Games, the NHL, and more. They helped launch a Netflix as a joke brand and played a key role in turning Angel City FC into the most valuable women's soccer team in the world. Anson, so great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing I'd like to do is if you could just sort of maybe tell the viewers who might not know who Battery is and what they do, maybe you could give the viewers some context there.
Yeah, so we originally started off as a video game dedicated agency as the gaming industry was changing from physical discs you'd buy at Target and Walmart to a completely digital ecosystem. We saw a need to change the way video games were marketed, right? Originally they were marketed like movies, right? You're trying to drive as many sales of physical discs at retail as you can. But then as they switched to digital, we saw a need to market them more like consumer packaged goods, like razors and razor blades than movies. And so we brought this evergreen brand building method to games instead of like the tentpole entertainment release. But then, once we got good in games, of course, gamers also drive cars and fly in airplanes and drink sodas and like do everything else everyone does. So we started to expand to other areas, of gamers, other brands that targeted them. And then we ended up just expanding out of that. But games is definitely kind of has always, been the through line with us, even though, we're not wholly dedicated to games anymore, but that was the original.
Yeah. Are you a gamer yourself? Has that been a passion of yours?
Yeah, I started my career in the games industry, and I thought I was a gamer until I played esports against other competitive gamers that were coworkers. I'm like, I feel like I'm like a minor league athlete trying to play in the big leagues. But yeah. I'm a big gamer.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess maybe I'd like to learn a little bit more about you because I was just looking on like your LinkedIn page and I noticed I don't want to go back too far, but back in 97, 98, maybe we could begin a little bit of your journey. I saw that you actually were, it says you're a Portuguese teacher. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was not to even go further back. I was originally raised in the Mormon church, and then I served a Mormon mission in Brazil, where I learned Portuguese. And then when I moved back to Utah to go to undergrad at Brigham Young University, it was there were so few jobs I was qualified to do, and no one really paid me to do anything as a college kid. But I found a lot of joy in that. So yeah, I taught Portuguese in college.
That's super cool. And then I'm just trying to track some of the, the moves that you make. It looks like you were kind of entering the industry doing the mail room. Is that what you're doing at Universal?
Yeah, it's where all good entertainment careers start, right? Yeah. So when I moved to LA from Utah again, the only job I could get, it was literally in the mailroom. So I was like one of the guys driving the golf carts on the Universal Studios backlot, like delivering mail to, the various corporate entities. And I would sneak my friends onto the Universal Studios theme park and like drop them off at the Jaws ride. And I probably cost Universal Studios tens of thousands of dollars for all the friends that I knock onto the theme park, but it was definitely the most fun mail delivering job I could imagine.
Yeah. How did you get that gig?
So I started as a temp. So I applied to be a temp employee at Universal because, I knew I wanted to go into entertainment, but I didn't know what. I'm like, well, okay, so Universal's got films and home movies and theme parks and music and I said, all right, let me start here and I can probably figure out a way to go. And I didn't set about being a mailman. It was just the only gig I could get. But then literally I would deliver mail to all the different divisions at Universal Studios. And I would deliver mail to the video games division. I didn't even know Universal had a games division, basically turning Universal films and properties, into games. And I started making friends with the folks that were in the games division. It sounds so stupid and trite, but I was like, this seems really fun. This just seems so cool that it's tech, it's storytelling, it's still a bit of that nerdiness that we all, love about the industry. And so I was like, are you guys hiring? Like the mail guy wants to hire. And they hired me as like a low level, like researcher, like researching what made different video games sell well. So I put down my male hat and joined the games division as a researcher.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm always curious because people are always looking, they always come to me asking me how they can get their foot in the door. What's the path like? So I'm always very interested in how people started. And I guess that was your entryway into the games. What sort of was the next step? Like what did that lead you into?
Yeah, so then I actually went to the toy industry where I was working on kind of physical. We had this idea of taking a lot of the original Atari 2600 games and a lot of retro games and packaging them in a joystick, which then this is going to sound so old, but then just plugged into the TV and you could then play. Obviously, that was before all the different ways you could play games now, but we had an idea of how to really take retro games and kind of bring it to the masses in a $1999 joystick and like Miss Pac-Man and Space Invaders and all the old games. So I moved to the toy industry and it was a really interesting opportunity of, you'd have to design the physical product and design the physical packaging, but then of course it was a software entertainment experience of using emulators and trying to bring back those old games and kind of reintroducing it to kids at that time and the parents who had grown up with it. And I was lucky that it really took me around the world because it was such a good price point, right? Of
Yeah.
$20. I mean, it literally plugs in your TV. You don't need a console. So being in the toy industry brought me kind of just around the world, marketing and creating that product. And it was really fun to move just from a software thing to a software and hardware experience together.
Yeah. That's great. I know now. I recently ordered one of those retro video game things where it's the inclusive like 1,000 different games. They're a little glitchy at times, but you can just plug them right into your TV, and I can play like Battletoads or old Mario Brother games that I had when I was like a child. So I guess that's like the 2025 version of it.
So fun.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Cool. And then is that starting to get into where you started your? I know you started your. You've had an agency called Dare. Is that correct? And that was also acquired. Is that maybe you can tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a blogger marketing platform called Rocket Excel, and then we sold it to as agency holding companies can be complicated. We sold it to an agency holding company who merged us with an existing group called Dare. But yeah, so we saw the when I was in toys, right? A lot of toy marketing is marketing to parents, especially if you're working on a younger preschool, younger age toy. And so we were starting to see that the traditional forms of TV and print were becoming non-effective, and people weren't quite calling them influencers back then. But we saw an opportunity with bloggers and the blogosphere as kind of a new way of spreading word of mouth, especially among parents about toys and educational toys. And so I went to my boss at the time and I said, all right, I think we should start divesting from TV and invest in this thing called the blogosphere. And I printed out my proposal. He wadded it up and bounced it off my forehead and said, shut that F up. I don't know if we can curse there. He said, shut the F up and do your job. And I was like, okay, that didn't quite go as well. I had like the ROI analysis, I had everything. He literally bounced off my forehead. I was like, all right, that's not going to work. So I decided to leave and set
Mm,
up a blogger marketing platform. And we were lucky to be early on with like Unilever and P&G and like literally marketing Dove and Tide detergent via bloggers who were acting as, the new PR and influencer. It's so funny. Back then, it was called mommy bloggers. It's not something, not a term that we use now, but it was really a new influence. And so, because we were lucky enough to be early on with a lot of blue chip, brands like Unilever and P&G, we sold it to an agency holding company and then got rebranded as Dare and kind of expanded it from there. But yeah, it originally came out of my boss bouncing the proposal off my forehead of more TV, more TV.
yeah. So what was the reason you think that he really thought that was a joke? What was there like? He just wasn't buying into it.
I mean, TV was still so powerful, and it was, like, really the
Yeah.
only way that toy advertising was done, and it was even done in, God forbid, print advertising was done. But 95% of the spend was TV. And at that point, that was probably the way it had been done for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
Prior to that, and it's like, who's this young 20 something kid telling me about the blogosphere? And look, I probably didn't have all the research I should have, and I probably
Mm,
didn't have everything backed up. But it also gave me an insight to, all right, how do you approach someone from a legacy standpoint of way of
yeah.
doing things and introducing a new method? And I was probably too cocky, and I was probably saying TV's dumb, so I probably didn't approach it in the best way that I could have.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting that you saw, you were seeing that coming as a young person, and you were kind of ahead of the curve on all of that. So so you left that company, and so you started your own. How were you feeling confidence wise in terms of making that move onto your own? Were you feeling like, very ambitious and I can do this, or was part of you still like, maybe I should just stick this out doing what I was doing, kind of in your comfort zone? Thanks for tuning in, folks. This episode is brought to you by Coming Up Creative, a relationship first boutique creative recruitment agency. We disrupt the creative ecosystem by running sophisticated, multi channel campaigns with custom video and voice outreach that actually gets responses. We actively market the agencies and brands we represent to help them stand out to today's industry's top talent, all backed by real human connection and AI powered targeting. If you're ready for a modern recruitment approach, visit www.comingupllc.com and get started today.
And I guess blame it on me being dumb and young and not having any kids, and I was the only mouth to feed. Like, I was just like, this feels like what I need to do. And I felt like I was done working in the big companies and the big corporate companies, and I wanted to start my own company. But the key was my two co-founders, who were super, super smart guys and also just close friends. I definitely didn't feel like I was doing it alone. I just felt like,
Yeah.
here's this team of Avengers, that we're putting together and building this together. So I honestly wasn't scared and nervous. And I put that on that I think I had the right, co-founders with me, that I felt like we
Yeah.
were together and launching this as a
How
team.
did you find each other in terms of, yeah.
One of them, I had worked together in the games industry at Universal, and the other one, he had met him through the other one, was at Warner Brothers
Mm,
in entertainment. So between the three of us, we had a lot of games and entertainment experience. And so my former coworker introduced me to the other one, and we just got along super, super.
that's cool. And then was that, did you guys decide to get an office and have like a real think tank and launch all of this? Or did you sort of do things remotely at that point? How did that look?
Yeah, that was definitely like pre-remote work. I don't even think working remotely was even an option in anyone's head back then. It was like, must get an office, must sit in an office, must be in an office 15 hours a day. That's obviously changed. Yeah, yeah. We just got like a little tiny office, and then it expanded to a bigger office in a different location, and then moved over to a different office. But yeah, there was no other way of thinking back then. It was like, we all must be in office together from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. every night,
Yeah.
and just go at it together.
Yeah. And so that eventually, how many people did that agency end up scaling out to be?
So we were a little over 75 people, and we had a big part of our dev arm, because we basically build apps that bloggers would embed on their pages, about the brand. So that division was in Sweden, and the rest of us were mostly in the US, a little bit in Canada. But yeah, we grew it to, a little over 75, 80 people at that time.
Wow. Yeah, that's tremendous. So yeah, is it, did you like learn a lot of lessons in scaling? I'm always curious about how agency scales. For example, in the recruiting industry, it's very tricky to buy and sell a recruiting agent. I think it's less than 5% of recruiting agencies ever sell, because basically on the top is a rainmaker, and then you can systemize as much as you possibly can. But eventually, if that rainmaker is not part of the process, the recruiting agency is essentially done, because it's such it's a relationship based industry. How does that work in like a creative agency like yours? How do you go about scaling it and also maybe not being the only part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that at least for me, that's definitely been the biggest personal challenge, right? Because it's like you start building something from scratch and you're wearing all these hats. Like you're the accountant and you're the HR person and you're the biz dev person and you're the creative person, right? And then hopefully over time you start shedding a few of those hats and you stop wearing those hats. And then you might be doing something, or at least with me, that was the hardest thing with me, right? I was like that. It was hard to know when to shed those hats, but then when you would bring people in, like a real finance person, I'm like,
Mm,
oh, okay, yeah, that person actually knows what they're doing and they're
yeah.
smart, and I didn't. I was just like figuring out QuickBooks on my own. It's at least with me, and look, maybe it's hubris, maybe it's pride. It was tough to start shedding those, but then when I did, and I bring those people in, I'm like, oh, they do it so much better than I. And then the true scaling happens, right? It's like I thought that in the beginning the clients were the most important thing because I was like, well, if you don't have paying clients, then we can't pay for rent, we can't pay for people. This sounds so obvious, but it took me a while to realize, well, no, stupid, employees are the most important part. If you're not creating this atmosphere, if they're not empowered, if they don't have the grit, well, then there are no clients. And it sounds
Yeah.
so obvious looking back on it, but the second I made that switch, and then the company really started to scale. And then it was fun. Like we'd start putting work out in the world that I had no idea what that work was and I'd never seen it before. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, good. Then I am out of the day to day because I would just muck it up if
Yeah.
I were. But seeing those campaigns launch and I had no idea what they were, that was kind of scary, but it was cool. It was like a sign that okay, I'm getting out of the way and it's scaling.
I don't want to be the cog in the wheel. That's interesting. I want to skip a few steps and go to into battery because I want to learn more about that part of your career. Maybe I'd be very interested to know what kind of exciting stuff you guys are working on now, and if you have any like favorite campaigns, things that you've been really excited about.
I mean, you named one of them that was really important for us as a company and was like a pinch myself moment was Netflix is a joke. When Netflix originally approached us, they said, look, hey, we're looking to go into stand up comedy and we want to tell the world we're all about stand up. Like the brief was that simple, and kudos to Netflix. It was like a half page brief. Sometimes you get these 15-page briefs. You're like, do you really expect we're going to memorize every page of this? And it was that simple, at that time, without going into too many details of the campaign. It was a really important, big, high profile thing that really set us out there. And then what's really cool is then to see where Netflix has taken that. And they took it well beyond what we could have ever imagined. Now it's like their platform to house all things comedy. It's a comedy festival. It's a serious satellite radio show, and to come up with that line Netflix joke. Well, again, we originally launched as a campaign, but it's kind of fun that we wrote ourselves out of a job. Because at a certain point, Netflix doesn't need us, right? They just take it and run with it. I'm like, that I think that's the sign of great work when the agency is not needed anymore. When the brand can then take it and live with it. Doesn't make you any money, but
Yeah.
it's I think it's a sign of the right work that you write yourself out of a job.
Yeah, that's really cool. How did when the campaign happened, how maybe you can describe how that came to be? Did Netflix like reach out to you, or was it like a relationship that you had that was kept warm, or and were you competing against anybody else with on that campaign as well?
So yes, yes, and yes. It was a big pitch because Netflix at that time were masters of not only would they pitch out different campaigns, but then they pitch the campaigns against each other internally
Yeah.
to see what was going. It was like a Game of Thrones gauntlet, the way
Yeah.
they did it. But yeah, it just came to us from a relationship from a couple of folks at Netflix that we'd worked with before, honestly took a chance on us. They came to our office before they sent us the brief. And it's one of those times in the agency where you're like telling your friends to come to the office to make it look like you have more people. You're like, oh my God, do we have enough beer on tap? How does the fridge look? Does it look lived in? Does it look like people actually? We were literally stacking the office with friends because we were like,
Yeah.
I don't know, 7 people. I mean, single digit people at that point.
Yeah, that's really funny. And I imagine some of the other agencies you're competing with might have had more hands on deck.
Yeah, totally. Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, kudos to nothing because they knew exactly how big we were by coming
Yeah.
to the office, and there was no I it was interesting that they did it that way and they kind of embraced that, the
Yeah.
smallness of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that you think that's kind of an advantage sometimes having a smaller team? I mean, just having, I mean, I guess the advantage of it could be, I mean, a lot of things. Maybe you get, it's more like, feels more like family. It seems a little bit more like there's not like a bunch of people in the chain. Like, do you think that's an advantage or was at that time?
I mean, I think it just depends on the brand. It
Yeah.
depends on the product. I mean, what I think we have learned is not trying to be something we aren't.
Hmm.
Right? And not trying to come across as that small group where we're not anymore, or not come across as that massive group, which we aren't quite in terms of global having 75 offices and things like that. I think that's a trick to new biz. And that's a big thing that I've learned over the years is when to say no. And man, saying no, that is just not in my DNA. That has been the hardest
Yeah.
thing for me to learn. And yeah, so to your point, really trying to figure out what do they need. And if we don't fit that, it's tough to pull the wool over their eyes and be
Yeah.
successful. If you are,
Yeah.
you're only be successful in the short term. It's not going to work in the long term.
Yeah. I like that. Authenticity is definitely really important. When you are pitching for these things, like early on, are you, I mean, it's essentially like if you're competing against other agencies, I imagine you might not get paid up front to do that. Is it kind of working without upfront payments a lot of times?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of times we don't. A lot of times we do. And
Yeah.
it is that trick because when you do get paid, a lot of times they want to own your work. So then you ask yourself, all right, are these ideas worth it for that payment if they're going to own the work, or are they paying us for that period of time to see what it's like to work together? Is it actually better if we aren't getting paid? And man, that is one of the key questions in pitching that there's no good answer. But
Yeah.
obviously we try to go for that fee, but sometimes we decline it if the fee is too small and we don't want to give away the work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I was interested on how those structures work. Cool. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about, I'd be curious to know when a campaign comes in and you are working on it, how does it look in terms of how it goes through the agency? So like let's say you have the pitch. Is it, I'm sorry, if you have the brief, it's coming to you first, or maybe there's an account manager, or and then how does it sort of like spiral out to your team? What does that sort of look like from inception to completion?
Yeah, so if it's a current client, right, it's just coming to, and I know it might seem like semantics, we call them brand managers instead of account managers. I just believe that the mindset shouldn't be I'm managing this account, but it should be like I'm here with this brand and the product, and I'm a steward of that brand. So typically, yeah, it comes into that the brand person, and the brand person will huddle with the strategy person and the creative person on that piece of business and figure out and disseminate it from there. And then on the new biz side, yeah, that can be a lot more fluid and messy and kind of sticky and like jelly when it comes into our head of new biz. And then she evaluates it and figures it out and tries to pull in the right people to even decide, is it something that makes sense for us? Does it not? Because, pitching can be a lot of big lift. It's like everyone's night job in addition to their day job. So it's just always pulling in, those key counterparts. And then in that first conversation with the client, if it is new biz, to really try to have as many of the key people from the agency on that, because we all want to suss it out together. Like we all want to suss out, is this the right opportunity to go at?
Yeah, and brand management, that was sort of your superpower, right? Sort of when I was looking at your career, that seemed like was that, am I correct about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
started as a brand and product manager. I've now since met a lot of people who are true agency brand people. I'm like, no, it's their superpower, not mine. But yeah, it's originally started on the client side versus the agency side. So it's kind of been fun to flip over the agency side and see how that works.
Yeah. In terms of your day-to-day now, how does that work? You're still actively engaged in working with battery, is that true?
Yeah, a lot of my day to day now is I'll throw out the dreaded acronym that's on everyone's minds, AI. It's really figuring out
Mm,
capabilities and how to advance the business and how to advance our pricing strategies. We're now part of the Havas network. So a few years ago, we sold a stake in Battery to Havas. We're not fully owned, but they own a portion of us. So a lot of times it's working with them of building out new opportunities and, working with some key clients. But I think I would hope the most value I can bring is the innovation and where we should be next and trying to look over that hill to figure out what we should be doing next.
yeah. Is that involved? Do you try out a lot of different tools and doing a lot of research and finding out what is going to be the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it from a media perspective, from a creative perspective, from an ideation perspective, strategy. Yeah, trying out a lot of those tools and meeting with it seems like every day there's a new company that's developing
Yeah.
some new AI tool. So it's trying, I don't think anyone can stay ahead of it. It's really just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for us and for our people and for our clients. And then, a big part of that is hiring, and figuring out who are the next people we should be hiring and how we can expand and focusing on them and clients.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if there was like my entire calendar would be filled up if I answered all the cold emails that I get about a new game changing AI thing that's out there. Has there been anything, if you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but has there been any tools that have really been revolutionary to your development at the company?
Yeah, I mean, we've used, especially in pitches, right? We've used a lot of AI tools to produce, finished work. It doesn't go
Yeah.
out publicly because it's a pitch, but using Runway and using Sora and using 11 Labs from a VO standpoint, even from a music standpoint, and that in pitches, it's been game changing.
Mm,
Literally, even just 2 years ago, you'd be mocking up images and you'd be sometimes mock up storyboards. And you're not mocking up a 30-second video ad. You're not mocking up a commercial unless you go and shoot them. That's very expensive. And now we have the ability to literally just produce AI, commercials in pitches, right? To
yeah.
really truly get that idea across that we want. And that's been, producing podcast ads, producing, audio, film. I mean, being able to produce that stuff in pitches has been totally game changing.
Yeah. It must save a lot of time and really give the client an idea of what it is going to look like when it comes to life.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so much more fun for the staff than just like
Y-
reading a script in a
Yeah.
pitch, to like no, just click play and boom, and it goes. It's enabled all those press play moments, which you're always
Yeah.
trying to get those in pitches, but to truly do that has been cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Obviously, yeah, I was going to ask you what are some of the big changes from when you began the industry and now, and of course, you just sort of described it. That's definitely interesting. And in terms of hiring, you just mentioned, curious if you could tell me like what, maybe a little bit more about that, like what you sort of, look for in people. I'd be curious about that.
Yeah. So, even before that, we started figuring out how are we going to find those right people. And sometimes we'll use resources that have us, which is great. But then also based on, so we have three offices, LA, Toronto, and Chicago. A lot of times we'll need to tap into recruiters or recruitment networks in those cities, right? Who understand the agencies in Chicago and the agency landscape and the brands that are done out of Chicago. So it really starts with, that right brief for our recruiter and exactly what we're looking for. And you know, it so depends on the right person, but we're painfully slow in hiring because we know, you get the wrong full-time person in, and man, that is not a great situation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways that different managers, go at it, but it really starts with writing that right brief for the recruiter and then giving us that right pool of candidates.
Yeah. What are some of the harder roles to fill typically that you find?
Strategy is a tough one,
Mm,
right? Because and I'm not saying it's easy on the creative side, but a lot of times on the creative side, you'll have a portfolio. You'll see the work they've done, and you'll be able to dig in. Okay, what was your role on this work? And on the
yeah.
brand side, what are the brands you manage? Literally, what are the KPIs and the business results of that brand? Strategy is a tough one. Even just that word, a lot of people are like, "What does that mean? Is it consumer
Yeah.
strategy? Is it business strategy? Where does it come in? So many agencies and brands use it in so many different ways. That's a really, really tough one to try and crack. I mean, it's easier when you're hiring on a specific retainer, on a specific brand. You know what that client wants. But if you want to hire a strategist, it's going to touch kind of five different brands and consumer types and audiences. It is that is a it at least has been really, really tough for us. We've hired some amazing people. We have some amazing people in house, but it's a tough one.
Yeah, interesting. When you're interviewing people, what sort of qualities are important to you when you're hiring?
I mean, I'll throw out a lot of cliches, but like humility is
Yeah,
really, really important. Uh, honesty and transparency when you dig in of like, like what when I was telling you about those retro video games. In 1 year, we did almost $1 billion in sales. Can I claim that I did $1 billion in sales? Of course not. It
yeah,
was a team across the globe. I was like one cog in that piece. So really figuring out what was their role and what did they do, and also like we it's the Google thing. Like we love people who have side hustles, who are doing different things. And obviously now, in this day and age, I think that's much more natural for a 20 something than it was when I was 20 something, which I think is great. A lot of people
yeah,
do have those different side hustles. There's so many ways that have made that easier. So we like dig into those and love those and the ability to get along and be a jerk, with our teams and kind of a passion for what they're doing.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Outside of work, what do you dig doing? What would you have any hobbies and anything fun that you'd like to share with us?
So I've got two little kid. Well, I guess little-ish at this point. I've got an 11-year-old daughter, and soon to be my son's going to be 16 in 2 weeks, which is terrifying to think that I'm a dad of a high school kid. It's fun for me because I've got a couple of interests as a kid that now my kids are really, really into, like basketball with my son, art with my daughter. So to be able to experience, because now they're old enough that I can experience that. Not that I'm trying to push it on them. I'm not trying to be that dad of reliving the glory years for his kids, but like to experience that. Because when I was growing up, I went to art school for high school, but then in college, I went to business. So it was just like these completely different worlds going from art school to business school. And I grew up with that foundation in the arts, and to share that with my daughter and kind of dig into it with her. And then just in sports, because Battery has done so much work in like the NHL and women's soccer, to dig into that with my son from coaching to strategy. And so it's fun to now experience that through their
Yeah, they must think you're a total rock star because you have a really cool job, and and they're
I
interested in the
don't
same
think
things.
so. I don't unless your dad's like Dwayne the Rock Johnson, maybe you think he's pretty cool. My son interned at Battery last summer, and he likes to say it was the worst experience of his life. So we got some growing to do there.
That's funny. I have 2 little kids too. Mine are much smaller. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 6.5-year-old daughter. She'll make me say that. So I'm not quite there yet in terms of getting to share some of those things. I coached softball this year and did not go well. My daughter did not enjoy it, even though I'm a huge baseball fan. But that was okay. But with the music stuff that we do, and of course, a lot of the work I do is in recruitment and game trailers and theatrical marketing and trailers. It's a big thing I do. We also create music and are pitching music for trailers. So my older daughter will tell all of her friends that I make all the movie trailer music. That like I'm like, stop telling all of your. I do not not making all of that movie trailer music. We are pitching some of that music. But it's kind of fun. I'll play some of the music in the house and they'll be like, Daddy, turn it off. It's scary. Because they're all like afraid of the trailer music that's getting made here. So I don't know. They know I'm a total nerd, but hopefully we'll find some of those same commonalities and share interests like you're able to.
That's awesome. My daughter just gets mad at me that she hasn't been in any of our commercials. I'm like, I can't be that guy as the CEO of the agency putting his daughter in his commercials. Like, come on, you know? So that she was literally just getting mad at me last night that she hasn't been in any battery commercials. So there you go.
That's funny. Are you a big are you a book guy? Do you like are you avid on that or podcasts or anything that you could recommend to the listeners?
Man, I just finished reading this book called Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. Crazy title. It just came out a year ago. It's so hard to describe, but it's basically about two young friends in their 20s who make a video game company while students at Harvard. It's fiction. And the story takes them to then setting up the company in Venice. One of the co founders is shot and killed. And then they grow to like these huge heights. It's a story of like romance, adventure, and video games. It's one of the best books I've read in so long. I'm usually like that boring biography guy, and I should go into fiction more, but that book is so badass. It's amazing. I forget who wrote it, but whoever she is, she's amazing.
Yeah, that's really that's awesome. And I know you said you were interested in or you like sports obviously. Do you play any sports still or did you play?
Man, I don't. I would get destroyed. I was soccer and football. So maybe that's good that my son is so into basketball that I wasn't a basketball player. So I'm not going to be that kind of sports, dad, but I still have such a love and interest for it. You can see the Hendrix behind me. I grew up as a guitar player and played in bands all throughout high school and college and just play kind of guitar on the side now. But my kids aren't into music yet. So we'll see.
That's cool. What kind of music are I mean, obviously you just said Hendrix, but what sort of like maybe give me some other music that you like or that inspires you?
Yeah, I wish I could play Hendrix today. In high school, I was like in grunge cover bands, so I was in a Pearl Jam cover band and then a
Cool.
Nirvana cover band. A lot easier to play than Hendrix.
Yeah.
But now, man, I'm just into a wide variety of music. I think definitely Hendrix is something that I always come back to, no matter what genre of music I'm into at a certain point in my life, whether it's EDM or country or hip hop, always come back to Hendrix. It's kind of that like through line, even though he died way before I was ever born. It's that
Yeah.
through line to the music that's blues and jazz and rock. And obviously, I don't need to describe why Hendrix is amazing, but it's that one. He's the one artist I can always come back to.
Yeah, I love Hendrix. One of my favorite albums is the live Woodstock version, and I really one of the things I really like on that record is the live version of Fire. They play it so fast, it's almost twice the speed of the original song, and it's just like it's just so heavy, you know what I mean? It's just like, I just crank it up. I love it. So I can relate on the Hendrix stuff. And I mean, I'm a big fan of, I love 60s music. That's kind of my favorite. Like I love the Beach Boys, rest in peace, Brian Wilson, Beatles, like the Kinks, Stones. I love all that kind of stuff. But I also love like even crooner jazz. Like I love like Frank Sinatra. I can play one of those early, sad crooner albums and get really into it. But grunge really felt to me like the last maybe it's just because I'm dating myself, but it felt like the last new thing. It was really like it was such a cultural thing. And my dad owned a record store, and Kurt Cobain was the coolest guy on the planet to me when I was, in elementary school, and the teenage kids were coming into my dad's music store and playing the Nevermind stuff, and I was like, wow, this is incredible, still incredible.
You're like Jack Black and High Fidelity. That reminds me of that movie. That's
Totally.
pretty cool. Our LA office is in Hollywood, and we're close to Amoeba Records, which is the
Oh,
big
yep,
record shop in LA. And it's so fun going over there. It's fun to like see this resurgence in vinyl and people like
yeah.
appreciating this analog experience. I do not want to go back to vinyl. I think Spotify and Apple Music are incredible, but it's an analog ritual experience of vinyl is cool to see people
Yeah.
embrace.
I mean, I think one of the most proud moments I have is when I go into my house and sometimes I'll see my daughter in her room. She'll have her headphones on. She'll have her headphones plugged into her record player, and she's just sitting there like listening to Taylor Swift, and she's like bobbing her head. I'm like, okay, this experience still exists. I can get hip to Taylor Swift sometimes. She writes some catchy songs. Can't help but get into those little.
I went to the last night of the Eras tour in Vancouver, and it like blew my. You hear about it and you hear about the power of Taylor Swift. I mean, that was unlike any show I've ever been to. The entire arena was standing for 3 hours straight, singing every lyric. I'd never seen something like that. It was wild.
That's amazing. The only thing I can maybe get close to, I've seen Paul McCartney live. My wife and I went for I guess it was a honeymoon, and we that was another one of those things. Like I was like, my eyes were just welling up, and I was just like, why is this happening? I'm like, am I crying? This is it had been like it was just like so moving to see that. And I think he was 80 when we saw him. So, or 78. I'm sorry, he was 78.
So, not to put us further down the rabbit hole, but Paul McCartney proposed to my mom in 1965. It was a joke, but it was an actual proposal. So, she was a reporter for ABC, and she was a teenage young reporter for ABC, and she was there interviewing the Beatles. It was 65, so they had the mop top haircuts, and she was there. I seen the footage. She was there in front of the press conference. They're all sitting behind the table, and she leans in, and after interviewing Paul, she says, "Paul, is there anything else you'd like to say to your fans out there?" And he stands up and leans in and says, "Nothing unless you'll marry me, dear." And my mom drops out of camera. She faints out of camera. So the running joke, and obviously it was a joke from Paul, but the running joke was that I could have been Paul's son if my mom had only played it right, you know.
Well, Anson, that is hands down the best story we've ever had on this podcast. So I'm so grateful that you shared that. But cool, man. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end it, because I don't think it can peak anymore for me. That was so cool. But yeah, man, thanks for hopping on and being on here and telling us about your story and your interests, and I really do appreciate your time and being here today.
Likewise, thanks, Justin. Appreciate the time.
All right, man. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.